What would you do if your family stole $5,000 from your savings account and then kicked you and your 6-year-old son out of Thanksgiving dinner? And what if I told you that wasn't even the worst part of this story? Because what I discovered about my sister Nicole and the $150,000 I'd been secretly paying changed everything. Stay tuned because this gets wild. I'm sitting in my car right now, hands shaking on the steering wheel, and my 6-year-old son Jacob is in the back seat asking me why we're not eating turkey with Grandma and Grandpa. The homemade cranberry sauce I spent 3 hours making yesterday is still sitting in its little gift bag on the passenger seat untouched. The foil is catching the late afternoon sunlight streaming through my windshield, and honestly, it's mocking me at this point. We just got kicked out of Thanksgiving dinner. Not asked to leave, not politely told there wasn't enough room. Kicked out. By my own parents, because my 28-year-old sister Nicole didn't want to see us. Nicole, who I just paid $15,000 for her third rehab stint 6 months ago. Nicole, who's been living rent-free in my parents' house since she dropped out of college 8 years ago. Nicole, who apparently gets to decide who's welcome at family gatherings now. Where are you watching from, by the way? Drop a comment and let me know. Because if you've ever been the responsible one in your family, if you've ever been the one everyone calls when they need money, but somehow forgets to invite when they're celebrating, this story is for you. And trust me, it gets so much worse before it gets better. Let me back up for a second. My name is Madison. I'm 30 years old, and I'm a single mom to the most amazing little boy you'll ever meet. Jacob's been my world since his dad decided fatherhood wasn't for him when Jacob was 2. We've built this beautiful little life together, just the two of us. I work in corporate marketing, I own my own home, I've got my life together. Or at least, I thought I did until about an hour ago. You know that feeling when your whole world shifts and suddenly everything you thought you knew about your family just crumbles. That's where I am right now. Sitting in my Honda Civic in my parents' driveway watching my breath fog up the windows because it's November in Michigan, and I can't bring myself to start the car yet. Jacob keeps asking if he did something wrong. He's 6. He woke up this morning so excited to see his cousins to eat pie to show Grandpa the turkey drawing he made at school. He put on his little button-down shirt that he only wears for special occasions, the one with the tiny footballs on it that he picked out himself. He's been talking about today for weeks, and now he's confused and hurt because the adults in his life have once again chosen his Aunt Nicole's feelings over basic human decency. But here's the thing that's really eating at me. This isn't the first time. This isn't even the 10th time. This is just the first time it's been this obvious, this cruel, this impossible to ignore. See, Nicole has what my parents like to call mental health struggles. And don't get me wrong, mental health is real, it's serious, and people deserve support. But somewhere along the way, Nicole's mental health became everyone else's responsibility except hers. Somewhere along the way, her feelings became more important than anyone else's, including a 6-year-old who just wanted to eat cranberry sauce with his family. I've been the family ATM for 5 years now. When Nicole needed money for therapy, I paid. When she crashed her car, I bought her a new one. When my parents couldn't make their mortgage payments because they'd spent their savings on Nicole's previous interventions, I quietly took over their bills. $1,500 a month for 3 years straight. Do the math, that's over $50,000, and that's just the mortgage. But none of that matters today, apparently. Because Nicole woke up in a mood, decided she couldn't handle seeing me, and my parents chose her comfort over their grandson's happiness. Over basic respect for their own daughter who's been keeping this family afloat financially and emotionally for years. I can hear Jacob sniffling in the back seat. He's trying to be brave, but his little voice keeps cracking when he asks why Aunt Nicole doesn't like him. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that his aunt is a 30-year-old woman who throws tantrums when she doesn't get her way? How do you tell your child that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will choose someone else's comfort over your existence? The worst part is I saw this coming. I felt it in my gut when my mom called last week and asked what time we'd be arriving. There was something in her voice, something careful and measured that wasn't there before. But I ignored it, because I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this holiday would be different. Maybe this time I'd be treated like an actual daughter and not just an emergency contact and bank account. I keep thinking about all the times I've made excuses for them. All the times I've told myself that families are complicated, that everyone deals with dysfunction, that I should be grateful for what I have. But you know what? I'm tired of being grateful for crumbs. I'm tired of being the understanding one, while everyone else gets to be messy and demanding and horrible. Jacob's kindergarten teacher always talks about how we should use our words when we're upset, how we should express our feelings in healthy ways. So here I am, using my words, telling you this story, because I need to process what just happened, and maybe because some of you out there need to hear that you're not crazy if your family makes you feel like you're asking for too much when all you want is basic respect. The cranberry sauce is getting warm in the sun. I made it from scratch because Nicole mentioned last year that she missed our grandmother's recipe. I spent yesterday afternoon simmering fresh cranberries and orange zest, thinking about how maybe she'd smile when she tasted it. How maybe we could have one normal family moment. How incredibly naive was that? My phone keeps buzzing with texts from my mom. Please understand Nicole's going through a hard time. She just needs space. Maybe we can do something next weekend. Next weekend. Like I'm some casual acquaintance they can reschedule instead of her daughter and grandson who drove 40 minutes with homemade food and genuine excitement to be part of this family. But here's what really gets me. This morning, I transferred money into my parents' account for their heating bill. $700 because my dad mentioned they were worried about staying warm this winter. I did it without question, without resentment, because that's what you do for family. 30 minutes later, I'm getting a phone call telling me not to come to dinner because it might upset Nicole. The cognitive dissonance is making my head spin. I'm good enough to pay their bills, but not good enough to eat at their table. I'm responsible enough to handle everyone's crises, but not valuable enough to be protected from humiliation. I'm dependable enough to be the family safety net, but not important enough to be treated with basic dignity. Jacob's quiet now, which is somehow worse than the crying. He's just staring out the window at his grandparents' house, probably wondering why we're sitting in the car instead of inside, laughing and eating and being a family. He doesn't understand that his mother has been slowly realizing that she's been begging for love from people who see her as a resource, not a person. And Nicole. Oh, Nicole. The golden child who can do no wrong even when she's doing everything wrong. Nicole, who's never held down a job for more than 6 months. Nicole, who's been in and out of rehab more times than I can count. Nicole, who screams at our parents when they don't give her money, but somehow I'm the problem when I quietly pay their bills. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve help. I'm not saying addiction isn't real or mental health doesn't matter. But I am saying that being sick doesn't give you the right to be cruel. Having problems doesn't mean you get to create problems for everyone else. And it definitely doesn't mean you get to exclude a 6-year-old from family dinner, because his existence inconveniences you. The sun is starting to set, and I know I need to get Jacob home. He's probably hungry, and honestly, I don't know what we're going to do for dinner. I didn't plan for this. I planned for mashed potatoes and turkey and family chaos, and maybe some awkward conversations, but ultimately belonging somewhere. I planned for Jacob to make memories with his cousins and fall asleep tonight, tired and happy and full of pie. Instead, we're going home to leftover pizza and trying to explain why sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most will choose someone else over you again and again, until you start to wonder if you're the problem. Until you start to question whether you're asking for too much when all you want is to matter to someone. But you know what? As I'm sitting here watching my breath fog up the windows and listening to my son try to understand why his family doesn't want him around, something is shifting inside me. Something that's been building for years is finally starting to crack open. Because this isn't just about today. This isn't just about Thanksgiving dinner or cranberry sauce or Nicole's latest crisis. This is about 5 years of being taken for granted. This is about $50,000 in financial support with no acknowledgement or appreciation. This is about being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who always shows up and never complains, and still being treated like I'm lucky to be included in my own family. I'm starting to realize that maybe the problem isn't that I'm not good enough for them. Maybe the problem is that they're not good enough for me. Maybe the problem is that I've been so busy trying to earn love from people who were never going to give it freely, that I forgot I deserved better. Jacob is asking if we can go get McDonald's for Thanksgiving dinner. And you know what? Maybe we will. Maybe we'll get Happy Meals and sit in the play area and create our own traditions that don't involve begging for acceptance from people who should love us unconditionally, but apparently can't manage basic respect. So, if you're out there and you're the responsible one in your family, if you're the one who always gives and rarely receives, if you're tired of being grateful for crumbs, while everyone else gets the whole meal, I see you. This story is for you. And trust me, it's just getting started. Because what happened next changed everything. What I discovered about my family, about Nicole, about the money I'd been sending them, about the lies they'd been telling me, it's going to blow your mind. And by the end of this story, you're going to understand why I'm sitting in this car right now. Not crying, not angry, but planning. Planning how to take my life back from people who never deserved the power I gave them over my happiness. Stay with me for this one. Comment below if you've ever been in a situation like this. Tell me where you're watching from, and whether you think I'm overreacting or if this resonates with your own family drama. Because this is just the beginning, and by the time I'm done telling you what really happened, you're going to understand why some families aren't worth fighting for, and why choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. You know, sitting here in this car, I keep thinking about how we got to this point. How did I become the family bank account while Nicole became the family princess? It didn't happen overnight. This has been building for decades, and I think I need to tell you the whole story for any of this to make sense. Growing up, Nicole and I were only 2 years apart, but you'd think we were from different planets. I was the kid who had my homework done before dinner, who stayed up late studying for tests I was already going to ace, who joined every club and activity I could fit into my schedule. Debate team, captain honor, society, president, academic scholarship to state university. I was the poster child for what my parents called having her life together. Nicole was the opposite, but somehow that made her more lovable in my parents' eyes. She was the artistic one, the free spirit, the one who needed protection from the big bad world. When I brought home straight A's, my parents would nod and say, "Good job, honey," before turning their attention to Nicole's latest drama. When Nicole brought home C's and D's, it was a celebration, because she's really trying her best. I remember this one time in high school I won the state debate championship. It was a huge deal. I'd been working toward it for 3 years, spending my weekends traveling to tournaments, while my friends were at parties. The day I won, I came home so excited to tell my parents. But Nicole had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend that same day, and she was crying in her room, so my victory got about 30 seconds of attention before everyone was focused on comforting Nicole. That's when I started to understand the family dynamic. My success was expected, so it didn't warrant much celebration. Nicole's struggles were dramatic and required everyone's immediate attention. I learned that being good at things meant being ignored, while being a mess meant being the center of the universe. But here's the thing that really gets me now, looking back. I wasn't just the responsible one. I was the one who took care of everyone else's messes from the time I was probably 12 years old. When Nicole forgot to do her science project, guess who stayed up all night helping her build a volcano? When she spent her lunch money on candy and then cried about being hungry, guess who gave her half my sandwich every day for a month? My parents thought it was sweet that I looked out for my little sister. They called me the little mother and said Nicole was lucky to have me. But what they didn't see, or chose not to see, was that Nicole was already learning that her problems were someone else's responsibility, that there would always be someone to catch her when she fell. So why bother trying not to fall? College was supposed to be my escape. I had a full academic scholarship to a school 3 hours away, and I was so excited to finally be somewhere where my achievements mattered, where I could just focus on my own life for once. But even then, I was getting phone calls from my parents about Nicole's latest crisis. She'd failed chemistry and was going to lose her scholarship. Could I call her professor and explain? Could I help her with her makeup work? Could I maybe tutor her over winter break? I did all of it, of course, because that's what big sisters do, right? That's what responsible people do. They help, they fix things, they sacrifice their own time and energy to make sure everyone else is okay. Nicole dropped out of college junior year. Not because she couldn't do the work, but because she'd rather party than study. She moved back home, and my parents welcomed her with open arms. No consequences, no expectations that she'd get a job or contribute to the household. She was finding herself and needed time to figure out her next steps. Meanwhile, I graduated summa cum laude, landed a great job in marketing, and bought my first apartment at 23. I was so proud of that apartment. It was tiny, and the heater was loud, and the neighbors upstairs sounded like they were training for the Olympics. But it was mine. I remember calling my parents to tell them I'd closed on it, and my mom's first response was, "That's nice, honey, but did you know Nicole's been really depressed lately? Her always Nicole." Every conversation, every family gathering, every phone call somehow circled back to Nicole's latest struggle. If I tried to share good news, it was overshadowed by Nicole's problems. If I tried to talk about challenges I was facing, I was reminded that at least I had my life together, unlike poor Nicole, who was still trying to find her way. When I was 25, I met David, Jacob's father. He was charming and funny, and for about 2 years, I thought I'd found my person. We got engaged, started planning a future together, and I was happier than I'd ever been. Right up until I got pregnant, and he decided fatherhood wasn't part of his life plan after all. That breakup nearly destroyed me. I was dealing with morning sickness, a demanding job, and the complete upheaval of every plan I'd made for my future. I needed my family's support more than I'd ever needed anything. But guess what was happening at the same time Nicole had discovered cocaine and was in the middle of what my parents called her experimental phase. So while I was navigating pregnancy alone and trying to figure out how to be a single mother, all the family energy was focused on Nicole's drug problem. Don't get me wrong, drug addiction is serious and scary, and I wasn't mad that my parents were worried about her. But I was hurt that my own crisis barely registered on their radar. I'll never forget the family dinner where I finally told them about the breakup and that I was going to be raising Jacob alone. My mom reached across the table, patted my hand, and said, "You're strong, Madison. You'll figure it out," before immediately turning to Nicole to ask if she'd been to her NA meeting that week. That's when I really understood my role in this family. I was the capable one, the one who would always figure it out, so I didn't need support or attention or even basic acknowledgement of what I was going through. Nicole was the fragile one who needed constant care and intervention. Jacob was born, and he became my whole world. David signed away his parental rights without a fight, which honestly was a relief. Jacob and I built this beautiful little life together. I worked hard, got promoted, bought us a house in a good school district. I was proud of what we'd accomplished, just the two of us. But then 3 years ago, everything changed. My dad had what he called a minor heart attack. It wasn't actually minor, it was serious enough that he had to take early retirement. But my parents downplayed it because they didn't want to worry anyone. Except they should have been worried because losing Dad's income meant they couldn't make their mortgage payments. I found out about their financial troubles completely by accident. I'd stopped by their house to drop off birthday presents for Nicole, and I saw the foreclosure notice on their kitchen counter. When I asked my mom about it, she broke down crying. They were 3 months behind on their mortgage, had maxed out their credit cards, helping Nicole through her first rehab, and didn't know what they were going to do. Of course I offered to help. These are my parents. They raised me. They gave me a good childhood mostly, and I wasn't going to let them lose their home. I told them I'd take over the mortgage payments temporarily, just until Dad recovered and could figure out his next steps. Temporarily turned into 3 years. $1,500 a month for the mortgage plus utilities when those got too high, plus car repairs when their old Toyota started falling apart, plus property taxes, plus homeowners insurance when they let it lapse. I was quietly keeping my parents afloat while they told everyone, including Nicole, that they were doing fine. But here's the part that really stings. During those same 3 years, Nicole went to rehab twice more. Fancy places that cost $20,000 to $30,000 each time. Guess who paid for those too? And when Nicole needed a car because she'd crashed hers driving under the influence, guess who bought her a reliable Honda? Because she needed reliable transportation to get to her meetings. I never said no. I never complained. I never asked for anything in return. I just quietly transferred money whenever there was a crisis, which was constantly, and I told myself I was being a good daughter and sister. I told myself that this is what families do for each other. But families don't just take from one person while giving everything to another. Families don't ignore one child's needs while catering to another child's wants. And families definitely don't kick one child out of Thanksgiving dinner to accommodate another child's mood swings. I keep thinking about all the times I've justified their behavior. All the times I've told myself that Nicole's addiction is a disease that my parents are just trying to help her, that I should be grateful I don't have those kinds of problems. But you know what? My problems mattered too. My struggles were real too. The fact that I handled them quietly and responsibly doesn't mean they didn't exist. When Jacob was 3, I went through a really rough patch at work. Budget cuts, layoffs, 60-hour weeks, trying to prove I was indispensable. I was exhausted and stressed and barely holding it together, but I didn't tell my parents because I knew they'd just worry and there wasn't anything they could do anyway. Plus, Nicole was in crisis mode again, so there wasn't room for my problems in the family narrative. But here's what's really messing with my head right now. I've been supporting this family financially and emotionally for years, and somehow I'm still the outsider. I'm still the one who gets excluded when Nicole decides she doesn't want to deal with reality. I'm still the one whose feelings don't matter when there's a choice between my comfort and Nicole's convenience. The worst part is how long it's taken me to see this pattern clearly. I've been so busy being the good daughter, the responsible sister, the reliable one, that I didn't notice I was being taken advantage of. I didn't see that my value to this family was purely functional. I pay the bills, I solve the problems, I show up when needed, but I don't get treated like an actual person with feelings and needs of my own. Last month, Nicole called me at work crying because she'd gotten fired from another job. Some story about her boss being unfair and her coworkers being mean and how she just couldn't handle the stress. Could I talk to my parents about letting her stay with them a little longer? Could I maybe help her out with some money until she found something else? I said yes, of course. I always say yes. I transferred $1,000 to her account that same day and told my parents she could stay as long as she needed. Because that's what you do for family, right? You help when someone's struggling. But now I'm wondering if I've been enabling this whole toxic dynamic. If my willingness to always be the solution has made it possible for everyone else to avoid dealing with consequences. If my quiet reliability has made it easy for my parents to focus all their attention on Nicole while taking me completely for granted. Sitting here in this car looking at my parents' house where Nicole is probably enjoying the Thanksgiving dinner I was uninvited from, I'm starting to see things differently. I'm starting to see that I've been participating in my own marginalization, that I've been so afraid of being the difficult one, the demanding one, the one who rocks the boat, that I've allowed myself to become invisible. But here's what I'm really grappling with as I'm telling you this story. Part of me wonders if this is just how families work. If there's always one person who gives more and gets less, one person who's taken for granted because they're dependable. Maybe I'm being too sensitive. Maybe I should just be grateful that I'm in a position to help my family when they need it. But then I look at Jacob in my rearview mirror and I think about what I want him to learn about relationships and family and self-worth. Do I want him to grow up thinking that love means always giving and never receiving? That being responsible means being invisible? That his value comes from what he can do for other people, rather than who he is as a person? The answer to that is absolutely not. I want Jacob to know that he matters, that his feelings are valid, that he deserves to be treated with respect and kindness. I want him to understand that healthy relationships involve mutual care and consideration, that you don't have to earn love by being perfect or useful or convenient. So if I want that for Jacob, why haven't I wanted it for myself? Why have I accepted being treated as less important than Nicole for so many years? Why have I been okay with being the family ATM while she gets to be the family princess? I think it's because I've been holding on to this fantasy of what my family could be if I just tried hard enough, gave enough, was understanding enough. I've been hoping that eventually my parents would see how much I've sacrificed for them and appreciate it. That Nicole would grow up and start treating me like a sister instead of a resource. That we could be the loving, supportive family I've always wanted us to be. But today, sitting outside their house with my confused son and my unwanted cranberry sauce, I'm starting to accept that fantasy isn't reality. That I can't force people to value me by making myself indispensable. That I can't earn the kind of love I want by being the kind of daughter they need. The sun is almost completely down now, and I know I need to get Jacob home and fed and into his normal routine. But I also know that after today, nothing is going to be normal anymore, because I'm done being the family doormat. I'm done sacrificing my dignity for people who don't appreciate the sacrifice. I'm done teaching my son that this is what family looks like. What happened next, what I'd discovered about exactly how much money I'd been giving them, and what they'd been doing behind my back, it's going to shock you. And my response to it, well, let's just say the old Madison who always said yes and never complained is about to take a very long vacation. But first, I need to tell you about the phone call I got on the drive home. The phone call that changed absolutely everything and made me realize that today wasn't just about Nicole's tantrum or my parents' favoritism. Today was about something much bigger, much more calculated, and much more cruel than I ever could have imagined. That phone call I mentioned, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I need to tell you about the 3 weeks leading up to today because looking back now, all the warning signs were there. I just chose to ignore them because I wanted so badly to believe that this year would be different. About a month ago, I did something I'd never done before. I decided to host Thanksgiving at my house. I know that doesn't sound revolutionary, but for someone who'd spent 30 years being a guest at other people's celebrations, it felt huge. I was excited about it. Jacob and I had been talking about it for weeks, planning the menu, deciding where everyone would sit at our little dining room table. I called my mom to invite everyone, and she seemed genuinely excited. She said it would be wonderful to have Thanksgiving somewhere new, that she was tired of all the work anyway, and that Nicole would probably love a change of scenery. We talked about who would bring what, and I volunteered to handle the turkey and all the sides, because honestly, I wanted everything to be perfect. For 2 weeks, I was in full planning mode. I bought a bigger dining table on Facebook Marketplace and spent an entire weekend refinishing it. I ordered special napkins with little turkeys on them because Jacob thought they were hilarious. I researched turkey recipes for hours and settled on this herb-crusted thing that looked amazing in the photos. I was going all out. But then 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, everything changed. My mom called me on a Tuesday night, and something in her voice was different. She was using that careful tone she gets when she's about to deliver bad news, but doesn't want to upset anyone. "Madison, honey," she said, "I've been thinking about Thanksgiving, and I'm wondering if maybe we should have it here instead. You know, keep things traditional." I felt this little pang of disappointment, but I tried to be understanding. Maybe she was feeling left out. Maybe she wanted to contribute more than just bringing rolls. So I said, okay, sure, we could do it at their house, if that's what she preferred. But then she kept talking, and that's when I started to feel like something was off. She said Nicole had been having a really hard time lately, that she'd just gone through a bad breakup and was feeling fragile, and that having Thanksgiving somewhere familiar might be better for her emotional state. Nicole's emotional state. Always Nicole's emotional state. But I pushed down my irritation and told myself to be supportive. Breakups are hard, and if Nicole needed the comfort of being in her childhood home, then that's what we'd do. Of course, Mom, I said. Whatever works best for everyone. I'll just bring the cranberry sauce like always. But here's the thing that bothered me. My mom didn't sound relieved when I agreed. She sounded more nervous, like she was reading from a script and wasn't sure if I was buying it. And when I asked if Nicole was okay, if there was anything I could do to help, my mom got vague and changed the subject. The next day, I called Nicole directly. We're not close, but I wanted her to know I was thinking about her and that I was sorry about the breakup. The call went straight to voicemail, which wasn't unusual. Nicole's never been great at returning calls. But when I mentioned to my mom that I'd tried to reach Nicole, she got that careful tone again. "Oh, Nicole's not really up for talking to anyone right now," she said. "She's just trying to focus on healing and getting back on her feet." Getting back on her feet. That phrase always makes me nervous when it comes to Nicole, because it usually means she's either lost another job, spent all her money on something stupid, or fallen back into old habits. But I didn't push for details, because honestly, I was trying to focus on positive things. Jacob was excited about Thanksgiving. I had a big project at work wrapping up, and I didn't want to borrow trouble. The first real red flag came 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. My mom called to ask what time we'd be arriving, and when I said we'd plan to come around 2, like we always do, she said that might be too early this year. Could we maybe come closer to 4? Nicole's been sleeping in a lot lately, she explained. And you know how she gets when she's woken up before she's ready. Yes, I know exactly how Nicole gets when she's woken up before she's ready. She gets angry and sulky and makes everyone else miserable until she's had enough coffee and attention to improve her mood. But since when do we plan family gatherings around Nicole's sleep schedule? Since when is 2 in the afternoon considered early for Thanksgiving dinner? But again, I said, okay, 4 o'clock it is. Jacob was disappointed because he'd been counting down the hours. But I explained that Aunt Nicole wasn't feeling well and we needed to be considerate. He's 6, but he's already learning that Aunt Nicole's needs come before everyone else's plans. The second red flag came a week before Thanksgiving. I was at Target with Jacob picking up ingredients for the cranberry sauce when my mom called. She sounded stressed, which was unusual for her when it came to hosting holidays. My mom loves entertaining and is usually completely in her element when she's planning a big meal. "Madison," she said, "I need to ask you a favor. Could you maybe not mention work to Nicole when you see her? She's been really sensitive about employment stuff lately." Not mention work. That's basically asking me not to talk about my life at all, since work takes up most of my time and is going pretty well right now. I just got promoted to senior marketing manager, and I was excited to share the news with my family. But apparently, Nicole's feelings about her own employment situation were more important than my accomplishments. "What happened?" I asked. "Did she lose another job?" "It's complicated," my mom said, which is her standard response when Nicole does something irresponsible, but my parents don't want to admit it. "She's just going through a lot right now, and I think it would be better if we kept conversations light and positive." Light and positive. Code for pretend everything is fine and don't ask questions that might upset Nicole. I've been getting those instructions my whole life. Don't mention your grades around Nicole. It makes her feel bad. Don't talk about your college plans around Nicole. She's sensitive about not having direction. Don't mention your promotion, your house, your success, your happiness, because it might make Nicole feel inadequate. But you know what? I was tired of dimming my light to make Nicole comfortable. I was tired of pretending my life wasn't going well just to spare her feelings. So I told my mom I'd try to be sensitive, but I wasn't going to avoid normal conversation topics just because Nicole couldn't handle hearing about other people's success. That didn't go over well. My mom got quiet for a minute, then said, "Madison, I know you don't understand what Nicole's going through right now, but she's really struggling. More than usual. Could you please just try to be patient with her? More than usual." That phrase sent a chill down my spine because Nicole's usual level of struggling already requires the entire family to walk on eggshells. If she was struggling more than usual, that could mean anything from another relapse to a complete mental breakdown. But when I asked for specifics, my mom clammed up. "I can't get into details," she said, "but Nicole specifically asked that we keep Thanksgiving small and quiet this year. Just immediate family, nothing stressful or overwhelming. Just immediate family." But we were already just immediate family. It's not like we were inviting the entire extended family tree. It was going to be my parents, Nicole, me, and Jacob. 5 people. How much smaller and quieter could it get? Unless Nicole had asked for it to be even smaller. Unless Nicole had specifically requested that certain people not be there. "Mom," I said, "are you trying to tell me something? Is Nicole okay with me and Jacob coming?" "Of course she is," my mom said, but she said it too quickly, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. "She's just been anxious about social situations lately, but she's looking forward to seeing you both." Looking forward to seeing us. Right, that's why she hadn't returned my phone call. That's why my mom was giving me a list of topics to avoid and asking us to come later in the day. That's why everything about this Thanksgiving felt wrong and stressful instead of warm and welcoming. But I wanted to believe my mom. I wanted to believe that Nicole was just going through a rough patch and that we could all come together as a family and have a nice day despite whatever was going on with her. So I bought the cranberries and planned to make the sauce just like I'd promised. The third red flag came 3 days before Thanksgiving. I stopped by my parents' house to drop off a package that had been delivered to my address by mistake. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and I figured no one would be home since my parents usually run errands that day, and Nicole typically sleeps until mid-afternoon. But Nicole's car was in the driveway. Not just parked, but parked badly, like she'd been in a hurry, or not entirely sober when she got home. And when I rang the doorbell, it took several minutes for anyone to answer, even though I could hear movement inside the house. When my mom finally opened the door, she looked frazzled. Her hair was messy, she wasn't wearing makeup, and she seemed genuinely surprised to see me, even though I'd texted that I was coming by. "Madison," she said, "this isn't really a good time." Behind her, I could hear Nicole's voice, and she didn't sound good. She was talking loudly and rapidly, the way she does when she's been drinking, or using something she shouldn't be using. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was agitated and demanding. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to see past my mom into the house. "Everything's fine," my mom said, but her eyes were darting nervously back toward the living room where Nicole's voice was coming from. "Nicole's just having a difficult day." A difficult day. At 3 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, while living rent-free in our parents' house and not working or going to school or contributing anything to society. I handed my mom the package and told her I'd see them all on Thanksgiving. As I was walking back to my car, I heard Nicole shout something about, "Can't deal with this right now," and a door slam somewhere in the house. My mom closed the front door quickly, like she was trying to contain whatever chaos was happening inside. That night, I called my dad's cell phone. Sometimes he's more straightforward than my mom about what's really going on with Nicole, but when I asked if Nicole was okay, he sighed heavily and said, "She's been better. This breakup hit her pretty hard and she's been having trouble coping." Trouble coping, that's dad speak for she's drinking again, or she's using again, or she's having a complete meltdown and making everyone else's life miserable. But when I asked if there was anything I could do to help, he said no, they had it handled. They had it handled. Famous last words in my family. Every crisis with Nicole starts with my parents insisting they have it handled and ends with me getting a frantic phone call asking for money or help or both. The fourth and final red flag came the night before Thanksgiving. I was in my kitchen simmering cranberries and orange zest, and the smell was incredible. Jacob was sitting at the counter watching me stir and asking questions about why cranberries pop when they get hot. It was one of those perfect domestic moments that I wanted to last forever. My phone rang, and I almost didn't answer because my hands were covered in cranberry juice, and I was trying to keep Jacob from sticking his finger in the pot. But it was my mom, and I figured she was probably calling with last-minute dinner details. "Madison," she said, and immediately I could tell something was wrong. Her voice was tight and strained, like she'd been crying or was about to cry. "I need to talk to you about tomorrow." My stomach dropped. When someone starts a conversation that way the night before a holiday, it's never good news. "What's wrong?" I asked, turning down the heat under the cranberries. "Nicole's having a really hard time right now," she said. "Worse than we thought. She found out some things about her ex-boyfriend that have really upset her, and she's not in a good place emotionally." Found out some things. I didn't want to know what that meant, but I could guess. Oh, Nicole has terrible taste in men and tends to date guys who are either using her for money, cheating on her, or both. Given that she doesn't have money to be used for, I figured it was probably the cheating option. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said. "Is there anything I can do?" "Actually," my mom said, and here came the careful tone again. "Nicole asked if we could keep things really small tomorrow. Just the four of us. She's feeling overwhelmed at the idea of a big gathering." Just the four of us. My parents and Nicole. Not me. Not Jacob. "Mom," I said slowly, "are you uninviting us from Thanksgiving dinner?" "No," she said quickly. "No, of course not. I just think maybe it would be better if you came a little later. Maybe for dessert instead of dinner. Nicole just needs some quiet time with me and your father right now." Dessert instead of dinner. After I'd spent 3 days making cranberry sauce from scratch. After Jacob had been counting down the days and talking about nothing but turkey and pie for weeks. After I'd rearranged my entire holiday around accommodating Nicole's needs and schedule. "Mom," I said, "Jacob's been looking forward to this for weeks, and I've already made the cranberry sauce. Can't Nicole handle being around us for a few hours?" There was a long pause, and when my mom spoke again, her voice was even more strained. "Madison, I know this is disappointing, but Nicole specifically said she can't be around you right now. She's in a very fragile state, and seeing you just reminds her of everything she doesn't have. Seeing me reminds her of everything she doesn't have. Let that sink in for a minute. My own sister can't bear to look at me because my life makes her feel bad about her own choices. And instead of telling Nicole to grow up and deal with her feelings like an adult, my parents are asking me to disappear so she doesn't have to be uncomfortable." "What exactly does that mean?" I asked. "You know," my mom said uncomfortably. "You have your house, your job, Jacob. You've got your life together. And Nicole's just in a really dark place right now about her own situation. So, because Nicole felt bad about being a 30-year-old unemployed woman living with her parents, I wasn't allowed to exist in the same space as her. Because Nicole was jealous of the life I'd worked hard to build while she was busy making one terrible decision after another, I was supposed to keep Jacob away from his grandparents on Thanksgiving." "Mom, this is insane," I said. "Nicole can't just ban me from family events because she doesn't like being reminded that other people make better choices than she does." "Madison, please," my mom said, and now she was definitely crying. "Just this once, just until she gets back on her feet. She's talking about maybe going back to rehab, and if that's what it takes, we need to be supportive." Back to rehab. So she was using again. That explained the agitated voice I'd heard when I stopped by the bad parking job, the way my parents were acting like they were walking through a minefield. But here's what really got to me. Even if Nicole was using again, even if she needed to go back to rehab, even if she was in the worst emotional state of her life, that didn't give her the right to exclude me and Jacob from our own family. That didn't make it okay for my parents to choose her comfort over our inclusion. "I can't believe you're asking me this," I said. "Just for dessert," my mom repeated. "Come around 6, we'll have pie and coffee, and hopefully Nicole will be feeling better by then. Hopefully Nicole will be feeling better." Translation: Hopefully, Nicole will be done having whatever meltdown she's currently having, and will be able to tolerate being in the same room as her successful older sister for an hour or two. I looked at Jacob, who was still sitting at the counter, completely oblivious to the fact that his grandmother was currently uninviting him from Thanksgiving dinner to protect his aunt's feelings. He was humming to himself and swinging his legs, probably imagining all the fun he was going to have tomorrow with his cousins and grandparents. How was I supposed to tell him that plans had changed? How was I supposed to explain that Aunt Nicole didn't want us there for the actual meal, but we could come later for dessert if we were lucky? How was I supposed to make him understand that sometimes adults make decisions that don't make any sense, but we have to go along with them anyway? Fine, I said finally, because what choice did I have? We'll come for dessert. Thank you, my mom said, and she sounded so relieved that I almost felt guilty for being angry. I know this isn't ideal, but family is complicated, and sometimes we have to make sacrifices for each other. Sacrifices for each other, right? Except it was always the same person making the sacrifices, and it was never Nicole. After I hung up the phone, I stood in my kitchen, staring at the pot of cranberry sauce that nobody was going to eat. 3 hours of work for nothing. Jacob looked up at me with his big brown eyes and asked if the cranberries were ready yet. Almost buddy, I said, because I didn't have the heart to tell him that we weren't going to need them after all. But here's the thing that really bothers me about that phone call. My mom said Nicole specifically couldn't be around me right now, that seeing me reminded her of everything she didn't have. But what about what I didn't have? What about the fact that I didn't have a sister who was happy for my success? Parents who prioritized my feelings? Or a family that valued my presence as much as they feared Nicole's absence? What about the fact that Jacob didn't have grandparents who put his happiness before his aunt's convenience? Or a family that made him feel wanted instead of tolerated? What about all the things we were missing because Nicole couldn't handle being reminded that actions have consequences and choices matter? But I pushed those thoughts down and finished making the cranberry sauce anyway. Because some part of me still hoped that maybe things would work out. Maybe Nicole would have a good day. Maybe my parents would remember that they had another daughter and grandson who mattered too. Maybe we'd still get to have some version of the family holiday I'd been looking forward to. I packed the cranberry sauce in a nice container with a bow on top. I laid out Jacob's special outfit for the next day. I tried to stay positive and focus on the fact that we'd still get to see everyone, even if it was just for dessert. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. Deeper than Nicole's latest crisis, deeper than her inability to handle my presence, deeper than my parents' constant accommodation of her demands. Something fundamental was broken in my family, and I was finally starting to see it clearly. I just had no idea how broken things really were or how much worse they were about to get. So there I was, Thursday morning, Thanksgiving Day, trying to explain to Jacob why we were going to Grandma and Grandpa's house later instead of earlier like we'd originally planned. He was disappointed, but handling it better than I was, honestly. He'd put on his little football shirt and kept asking if he could bring his new Pokemon cards to show Grandpa. Of course, buddy, I told him, trying to keep my voice cheerful. Grandpa will love to see them. I spent the morning cleaning my house and trying to stay busy, but I couldn't shake this feeling of dread that had been sitting in my stomach since my mom's phone call the night before. Something felt wrong about the whole situation, but I kept telling myself that Nicole was just going through a hard time and we needed to be patient. Around 5:30, I loaded Jacob and the cranberry sauce into the car. The sauce looked beautiful in its glass container with the little ribbon I'd tied around the lid. Jacob was chattering excitedly about all the things he wanted to tell his grandparents, and for a moment I let myself believe that everything was going to be okay. The drive to my parents' house takes about 20 minutes, and I spent the whole time giving myself a pep talk. Be understanding, be supportive, don't take anything personally. Nicole's going through a crisis, and families help each other through crises. I could handle a few hours of awkwardness if it meant Jacob got to spend time with his grandparents. But the moment I pulled into the driveway, I knew something was very wrong. The house felt different somehow, like there was an electric tension in the air. My dad's car was there. My mom's car was there, and Nicole's car was parked at that same weird angle I'd noticed earlier in the week. Jacob and I walked up to the front door, and I could hear voices inside before I even rang the doorbell. Not happy holiday voices, but tense, urgent voices, like people in the middle of an argument. I hesitated for a second, wondering if I should just turn around and come back later, but Jacob was already reaching for the doorbell. My mom answered the door, and the smile she gave us was so forced it looked painful. She was dressed nicely for Thanksgiving, but her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying, and there was something frantic about the way she hugged Jacob. "Madison, Jacob, you're here," she said, and her voice was too bright, too cheerful. "Come in, come in." But she didn't step aside to let us in. She stood in the doorway like she was blocking our path, and I could see my dad behind her making some kind of hand gesture that I couldn't interpret. "Is everything okay?" I asked, holding out the cranberry sauce. "I brought the sauce, like I promised." "Oh, that's lovely, dear," my mom said, taking the container but not really looking at it. "Listen, maybe we should talk outside for a minute before you come in." Before I could ask why, Nicole's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Is that Madison, Mom? You promised me she wasn't coming until later." The way she said my name like it tasted bad in her mouth made my stomach clench. Jacob looked up at me with confusion, and I tried to give him a reassuring smile even though my heart was starting to race. "Nicole, calm down," I heard my dad say from inside the house. "It's just for a little while." "Just for a little while?" Nicole's voice was getting louder and more agitated. "You said she was coming for dessert. It's not even 6 o'clock yet." My mom was still standing in the doorway, and I could see her struggling with what to say. Behind her, I could hear Nicole's footsteps getting closer, and there was something unsteady about the rhythm, like she was stumbling slightly. "Mom," I said quietly, "maybe we should just come back later if this is a bad time." But before my mom could respond, Nicole appeared behind her, and the look on her face made my blood run cold. Her eyes were glassy and unfocused, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in 3 days earlier. But it was the expression of pure rage directed at me that really scared me. "What is she doing here?" Nicole demanded, pushing past my mom to stand in the doorway. "You promised me I wouldn't have to deal with her today." Deal with me, like I was some kind of burden instead of her sister. Like my presence was something that needed to be managed rather than welcomed. "Nicole, please," my mom said, but her voice was weak and pleading. "Madison just came for dessert like we discussed." "No," Nicole said, and her voice was getting shrill. "You said 6 o'clock. It's not 6 o'clock. I specifically said I needed more time before I had to pretend everything was fine." Pretend everything was fine, so she wasn't even planning to be civil to me. She was just going to tolerate my existence for the minimum amount of time necessary to get through dessert. Jacob pressed closer to my side, and I could feel him starting to get scared. This wasn't the warm family gathering he'd been expecting. This was chaos and hostility, and grown adults behaving worse than he did when he was having a bad day. "Nicole," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "I'm sorry we're early. We can wait in the car if you need more time." "More time for what?" she snapped. "More time to prepare myself for another lecture about how I need to get my life together. More time to listen to you talk about your perfect job and your perfect house and your perfect life." I stared at her in shock. I hadn't said a word about my job or my house or anything else. I'd literally just arrived and offered to wait in the car if needed. But somehow, just by existing, I was already causing problems. "I wasn't going to lecture you about anything," I said. "I just wanted to have Thanksgiving dinner with my family." "Your family," Nicole repeated, and she laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Right, your family that you only talk to when you need to feel superior about something." That hit me like a physical blow. When I need to feel superior, I'm the one who's been paying their bills for 3 years. I'm the one who's never missed a birthday or holiday. I'm the one who drops everything when anyone in this family needs help. "Nicole, that's not fair," I started to say, but she cut me off. Fair, she said, and now she was practically shouting. You want to talk about fair would be not having to spend every family gathering being reminded of what a failure I am compared to perfect Madison, who never makes mistakes. I never said you were a failure, I said, and I could hear my own voice starting to shake. I've never said anything like that. You don't have to say it, Nicole said. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. Poor Nicole, the screw-up sister. Poor Nicole, the disappointment. Poor Nicole, who can't get her act together like Madison did. This was insane. I was being accused of things I'd never said, feelings I'd never expressed, attitudes I'd never had, but my parents were just standing there, letting Nicole attack me on their doorstep instead of telling her to stop. Nicole, my dad finally said, that's enough. Madison didn't do anything wrong. Didn't do anything wrong? Nicole turned her fury on him. She exists! That's what she did wrong. She exists and makes me feel like garbage just by breathing. And that's when she noticed Jacob. Jacob, who had been hiding behind my legs, trying to make sense of why his aunt was screaming at his mother. Jacob, who was wearing his special football shirt and holding his Pokemon cards and had been so excited to show them to his grandparents. Jacob, who was 6 years old and didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of adult dysfunction. Nicole looked down at him, and for a second, I thought maybe seeing him would snap her out of whatever spiral she was in. Maybe she'd remember that there was a child present and lower her voice and try to act like a responsible adult. Instead, she said the words that changed everything. And I don't want that brat here either. Brat. She called my 6-year-old son a brat. The silence that followed was deafening. Jacob's face crumpled, and I could see him trying to understand what he'd done wrong. My parents looked horrified, but neither of them said anything to defend Jacob or correct Nicole. That's when something inside me snapped. Excuse me? I said, and my voice was deadly quiet. You heard me? Nicole said, apparently too high or drunk or whatever to realize she'd just crossed a line that should never be crossed. I don't want either of you here. You make me sick and your kid is annoying. Don't you dare talk about my son that way, I said, and now I was shaking with rage. He's 6 years old, Nicole. He's done nothing to you except exist, which apparently is a crime in your book. Whatever, Nicole said, waving her hand dismissively. I don't care. I want you both to leave. I looked at my parents, waiting for one of them to step in and shut this down. Waiting for someone to tell Nicole that she didn't get to kick family members out of family gatherings just because she was having a bad day. Waiting for someone to stand up for Jacob, who was now crying quietly beside me. But my mom just looked at me with this pleading expression and said, Madison, maybe it would be better if you came back another time. Nicole's having a really hard day and she's not herself right now. Not herself. As if being drunk or high gave her permission to be cruel to a child. As if having problems meant she could treat people however she wanted without consequences. Are you serious right now? I asked. You're going to let her call Jacob a brat and then ask us to leave. She's fragile right now, my dad said, and his voice was weak and apologetic. She just went through a bad breakup and she's not thinking clearly. Not thinking clearly. That was their excuse for letting Nicole emotionally abuse a 6-year-old. She's not thinking clearly, so it's okay for her to traumatize her nephew on Thanksgiving. I looked down at Jacob, who was looking up at me with tears in his eyes, waiting for me to fix this somehow. Waiting for the adults to start acting like adults and make this situation make sense. Mommy, he whispered, what did I do wrong? And that was it. That was the moment I realized that I was done protecting everyone else's feelings at the expense of my son's well-being. Done making excuses for Nicole's behavior. Done accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from strangers just because we shared DNA. You didn't do anything wrong, baby, I told Jacob, picking him up, even though he was getting too big for me to carry easily. Some people are just mean when they're sad, and that's not your fault. Madison, please, my mom said. Can't we work this out? It's Thanksgiving. No, I said, and my voice was steadier than I felt. We can't work this out. Your daughter just called my son a brat for no reason. And instead of defending him, you're asking me to leave so she doesn't have to be uncomfortable. That's not how families treat each other. She's sick, my dad said desperately. She needs help. Then get her help, I said. But don't ask me to subject my child to her abuse while you figure it out. I turned to leave, but Nicole wasn't done. She followed us onto the porch, still ranting. That's right, run away, she called after us. Go back to your perfect little life and leave the rest of us alone. You never cared about this family anyway. I stopped walking and turned back to look at her. This woman, who I'd been supporting financially for years, who I'd worried about and made excuses for and tried to help despite getting nothing but hostility in return. I never cared about this family, I said. Nicole, I've been paying Mom and Dad's mortgage for 3 years. I paid for your last 2 rehab stints. I bought you a car when you crashed yours. I've given this family everything I have, and you have the nerve to say I don't care. For a second, Nicole looked stunned, like she hadn't expected me to fight back. But then her face twisted with something ugly and mean. Nobody asked you to do any of that, she said. You just did it to make yourself feel important. To make myself feel important. Right. I'd been quietly supporting this family financially because I had some kind of savior complex, not because I loved them and wanted to help when they were struggling. You're unbelievable, I said, and I didn't even try to hide my disgust. Absolutely unbelievable. I carried Jacob to the car while my parents stood on the porch looking helpless, and Nicole continued shouting things that I stopped listening to. Jacob was crying harder now, and all I wanted was to get him away from this toxic mess that my family had become. Mommy, he said as I buckled him into his car seat, why doesn't Aunt Nicole like me? I don't know, baby, I said, because how do you explain mental illness and addiction and family dysfunction to a 6-year-old? Sometimes grown-ups have problems that make them say mean things they don't really mean. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure I believed it. Nicole had seemed pretty clear about not wanting us there, and my parents had been pretty clear about choosing her comfort over our inclusion. I sat in the driver's seat for a moment, trying to figure out what to do next. It was Thanksgiving, but we had nowhere to go and nothing planned. All the restaurants would be closed. Jacob was hungry and confused and probably traumatized by what had just happened. Where are we going, Mommy? He asked. I don't know yet, I admitted. Maybe we'll go to the park for a little while and figure it out. The park seemed like a safe, neutral place where Jacob could run around and hopefully forget about the horrible scene we'd just escaped. I drove to the little playground near our house, the one with the good swings and the duck pond. Jacob perked up a little when he saw the playground equipment, and I was grateful that 6-year-olds are resilient enough to be distracted by slides and monkey bars. I sat on a bench watching him play, trying to process what had just happened and figure out what I was going to tell him about Thanksgiving dinner. That's when my phone buzzed with a text message from my mom. Madison, I'm so sorry about what happened. Nicole didn't mean what she said. Can we try again tomorrow? Didn't mean what she said? Right, she accidentally called my son a brat and accidentally told us both to leave. It was all just a big misunderstanding. I was about to text back something sarcastic when my phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from my banking app. Someone had made a large withdrawal from my savings account. My blood ran cold. I'd set up a joint account with my parents a few years ago so I could easily transfer money for their bills without having to write checks or deal with bank transfers every month. They had access to it for emergencies, but they'd never used it without asking me first. I opened the app with shaking hands and saw the withdrawal. $5,000. Taken out yesterday, the day before Thanksgiving. Around the same time, my mom was calling to uninvite us from dinner. $5,000. More money than Nicole had probably seen in one place in years. More money than my parents had in their own checking account. I stared at the screen, trying to make sense of it. Maybe there had been a real emergency. Maybe my dad had needed expensive medication, or the furnace had broken, or something had happened that required immediate cash. But then my mom texted again. Nicole had some debts that needed to be taken care of right away. We'll explain everything later. Please don't be upset. Nicole had debts. Of course she did. And instead of telling me about it, instead of asking if I could help, they'd just taken the money without permission and used it to bail Nicole out of whatever mess she'd gotten herself into this time. $5,000 stolen from my savings account to pay for Nicole's debts. And I found out about it while sitting on a park bench watching my son try to forget that his aunt had called him a brat and kicked him out of Thanksgiving dinner. I started laughing, but not because anything was funny. I was laughing because the alternative was screaming, and Jacob didn't need to see his mother have a complete breakdown in the middle of a playground. They'd stolen my money to pay Nicole's debts, and then Nicole had the audacity to call me selfish and claim I didn't care about the family. They'd taken $5,000 from my savings account without asking, and then kicked me and my son out of Thanksgiving dinner because Nicole couldn't handle being reminded of her failures. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The entitlement was mind-blowing. The complete lack of respect for me as a person was finally impossible to ignore. "Mommy," Jacob called from the top of the slide. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," I called back, wiping tears from my face. Just thinking about what we should do for dinner. But I wasn't thinking about dinner. I was thinking about $5,000 stolen from my account. I was thinking about 3 years of mortgage payments that were apparently taken for granted. I was thinking about Nicole calling my son a brat while living off the money I'd provided. I was thinking about how I'd spent 30 years trying to earn love from people who saw me as a bank account with legs. People who valued me only for what I could provide, not for who I was as a person. And I was thinking about how that was about to change in a very big way. Because if they wanted to treat me like an ATM instead of a family member, then they were about to learn what happens when the ATM stops working. If they thought they could steal my money and abuse my child and expect me to just take it quietly, they were about to discover how wrong they were. But first, I needed to get Jacob some dinner and figure out how to salvage what was left of our Thanksgiving. Because no matter how angry I was at my family, I wasn't going to let their dysfunction ruin the holiday for my son. The real reckoning would come later. After about an hour at the playground, Jacob started getting hungry, and honestly, so was I. The adrenaline from the confrontation at my parents' house was wearing off, and I was left with this hollow feeling in my stomach that wasn't just from missing lunch. "Mommy," Jacob said, sliding down the big slide one more time, "my tummy is making noises." "Mine too, buddy," I said, standing up from the bench where I'd been staring at my phone screen reading that text about Nicole's debts over and over again. "What do you think about going to get some dinner?" "Can we get pizza?" he asked hopefully. I was about to say yes when I realized that I didn't want to spend Thanksgiving eating takeout pizza in our empty house. Jacob deserved better than that, even if the day had been a complete disaster. So, I made a decision that probably saved both of our sanity. "How about we go to the grocery store and get stuff to make our own Thanksgiving dinner?" I suggested. "Just me and you. We can get a rotisserie chicken and some sides and make it special." Jacob's face lit up like I'd suggested we go to Disney World. "Really? We can make our own Thanksgiving?" "Absolutely," I said, and for the first time, all day, I felt like I was making the right choice. Our house, our rules, our traditions. The grocery store was surprisingly busy for Thanksgiving evening. Apparently, we weren't the only people who'd had their original plans fall through and needed to improvise. There was something comforting about being surrounded by other people who were just trying to make the best of an imperfect situation. Jacob was having a blast picking out ingredients. He chose the biggest rotisserie chicken in the case, a bag of those fancy dinner rolls that come in the tube, and insisted we needed both regular mashed potatoes and sweet potato casserole because Thanksgiving should have lots of orange food. I was loading our cart with cranberry sauce, much better cranberry sauce than the homemade stuff that was probably still sitting on my parents' counter when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Madison, is that you?" I turned around and saw Olivia Chen, a nurse from Jacob's pediatrician's office. We'd chatted a few times during Jacob's checkups, and I'd always liked her warm, genuine personality. She was standing there with her own cart full of last-minute grocery items and a tired but friendly smile. "Hi, Olivia," I said suddenly. feeling self-conscious about my red-rimmed eyes and the fact that I was grocery shopping for Thanksgiving dinner at 6 o'clock on Thanksgiving. Last-minute dinner plans, she asked, nodding toward our cart full of random ingredients. Something like that. I said, not really wanting to get into the whole story. How about you same? She said with a laugh. My mom was supposed to come up from Phoenix, but her flight got canceled this morning. So it's just me and my daughter Mia improvising. That's frustrating, I said, and I meant it. Flight cancellations were awful, especially on holidays. You know what? Olivia said, and there was something spontaneous and warm in her voice. This might sound crazy, but do you and Jacob want to join us for dinner? I was just grabbing stuff to make a completely non-traditional Thanksgiving meal, and it would be so much more fun with company. I stared at her for a second, not sure I'd heard correctly. This woman who barely knew me was inviting me and Jacob to have Thanksgiving dinner with her family. No strings attached, no emotional manipulation, just genuine kindness. Oh, that's so sweet of you to offer, I said, but we don't want to impose. You wouldn't be imposing, Olivia said firmly. Honestly, you'd be doing me a favor. Mia's been moping around all day about her grandmother not being there, and having Jacob around would probably cheer her up. She's 8, so she's right in that sweet spot where she still thinks 6-year-olds are cool. Jacob tugged on my sleeve. Mommy, can we please? I looked down at his hopeful face, then back at Olivia's genuinely welcoming expression, and something inside me just broke open. When was the last time someone had invited me somewhere just because they wanted my company? When was the last time someone had offered to include Jacob without making it feel like a burden or an obligation? Are you sure? I asked, and my voice was a little shaky. Absolutely, Olivia said. Fair warning, though, I'm planning to make Thanksgiving tacos because that's what we had ingredients for, and Mia's probably going to want to show Jacob every single Pokemon card she owns. Tacos sound amazing, I said, and I meant it. And Jacob loves Pokemon cards. I have a Charizard, Jacob announced to Olivia, apparently considering this sufficient introduction. Well then, Olivia said with a grin, you and Mia are going to get along just fine. An hour later, Jacob and I were sitting in Olivia's cozy living room, watching him, and Mia spread Pokemon cards all over her coffee table, while Olivia and I worked on dinner in the kitchen. Her house felt warm and lived in, with family photos on the walls and the kind of comfortable clutter that comes from actually enjoying your space. So, Olivia said, as she seasoned the chicken we were cooking for the tacos. Do you want to talk about why you were grocery shopping for Thanksgiving dinner at 6 o'clock, or should I mind my own business? I appreciated that she gave me the option not to share. So many people ask intrusive questions and then get offended if you don't want to answer. But Olivia seemed genuinely concerned without being pushy. Family drama, I said, which was the understatement of the century. My sister had a meltdown and decided she couldn't handle having Jacob and me at dinner. Ouch, Olivia said, pausing in her seasoning to give me a sympathetic look. That's rough, especially on a holiday. Yeah, I said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. She called Jacob a brat and told us both to leave, and my parents sided with her because she's going through a hard time. Olivia's expression shifted from sympathetic to angry. She called Jacob a brat. Jacob, that sweet kid in there who just complimented Mia's Pokemon binder and offered to share his fruit snacks. That's the one, I said, and hearing someone else express outrage on Jacob's behalf felt incredibly validating. What a piece of work, Olivia said flatly. And your parents went along with that. They said she was fragile and needed space, I said. Apparently, her feelings matter more than ours. Olivia shook her head in disgust. I see this all the time in my work. Families that enable one person's bad behavior and expect everyone else to just deal with it. It's toxic as hell. The fact that she understood that she didn't try to make excuses for my family or suggest that I should be more patient was like a weight lifting off my chest. I'd been starting to wonder if I was overreacting, if I was being too sensitive about the whole situation. The worst part, I found myself saying, is that I just found out they took $5,000 from our joint savings account yesterday to pay for Nicole's debts without asking me while they were uninviting us from dinner. Olivia stopped chopping onions and turned to stare at me. They stole $5,000 from you and then kicked you out of Thanksgiving dinner. Pretty much, I said, and saying it out loud to someone who wasn't trying to rationalize it made me realize how completely insane the whole situation was. Madison, Olivia said carefully, that's not family drama. That's financial abuse and emotional abuse. You know that, right? Financial abuse. I'd never thought of it in those terms, but she was right. Taking money from my account without permission, especially while simultaneously excluding me from family events, was absolutely a form of abuse. I keep making excuses for them, I admitted. Nicole has addiction issues. My parents are struggling. Financially, families are complicated. But you're right. This isn't normal. No, it's not, Olivia said firmly. And you don't have to put up with it just because you're related to them. From the living room, we could hear Jacob and Mia laughing about something, and the sound made my heart feel lighter than it had all day. This was what family time should feel like. Warm and welcoming and full of genuine joy, not walking on eggshells and managing other people's moods. Thank you, I said to Olivia, for inviting us, for listening, for not making me feel crazy. Thank you for coming, she said. Honestly, this is so much better than Mia and me eating sad turkey sandwiches and watching Netflix. Dinner was amazing. Not because the food was fancy, it was just simple taco meat and store-bought tortillas and bagged salad, but because of the atmosphere. Mia was a delightful kid who kept Jacob entertained with stories about her school and showed him how to fold his taco so the filling didn't fall out. Olivia was funny and easy to talk to, and she genuinely seemed to enjoy having us there. But the moment that really got to me happened when Olivia asked everyone to share what they were thankful for. Mia went first. I'm thankful for tacos, and new friends, and Pokemon cards. Olivia said she was thankful for flexibility and unexpected company, and the fact that her flight to Phoenix got rescheduled for next weekend, so she'd still get to see her mom. Then it was Jacob's turn, and what he said made my eyes fill with tears. I'm thankful for chicken, and new friends, and not crying anymore. Not crying anymore. My 6-year-old was grateful for not being in tears, which is where he'd been a few hours earlier thanks to his aunt's cruelty and his grandparents' failure to protect him. That's a great list, buddy, I managed to say, my voice a little thick. When it was my turn, I looked around the table at these people who had welcomed us into their home without hesitation, who had made Jacob laugh instead of cry, who had shown us more kindness in 3 hours than my own family had shown us in months. I'm thankful for kind strangers who become friends, I said, and for the reminder that family doesn't always mean the people you're related to. After dinner, while the kids played video games, Olivia and I sat on her couch with glasses of wine, and I found myself telling her the whole story. The years of financial support, the constant drama, the way Nicole's problems always took priority over everyone else's needs. You know, what really gets me, I said. I've been supporting them for years, and somehow, I'm still the outsider. I'm still the one who gets excluded when it's convenient. Because they take you for granted, Olivia said simply. They know you'll always be there. Always. Say yes. Always bail them out. So they don't have to treat you well to keep you around. That hit me like a punch to the stomach because it was so obviously true. I'd trained my family to treat me like a doormat by never standing up for myself, never saying no, never demanding the respect I deserved. I don't know how to change it, I admitted. I've been doing this for so long, I don't know how to be anything other than the responsible one who fixes everything. You start by setting boundaries, Olivia said, and you enforce them even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That night, after Jacob was asleep in his own bed, exhausted, but happy from his adventure with new friends. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and finally did something I should have done years ago. I wrote an email to my parents. Not an angry rant, not an emotional outburst, but a calm, detailed breakdown of exactly what I'd contributed to this family over the past 5 years and exactly how I'd been treated in return. Mom and Dad, I started. I'm writing this email because I need you to understand some things that I don't think you fully grasped about our family dynamic. I listed everything. Every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every car repair, every rehab bill, every emergency fund transfer. I added it all up, and the total was staggering. Over the past 5 years, I'd given my family more than $150,000. $150,000 to people who had just stolen $5,000 more from my savings account and then kicked me and my 6-year-old son out of Thanksgiving dinner to spare Nicole's feelings. I wrote about the pattern of enabling Nicole's behavior while taking my support for granted. I wrote about the emotional toll of always being the responsible one while never being valued for it. I wrote about how hurtful it was to be excluded from family events while simultaneously being expected to fund them. And then I wrote about what was going to change. Effective immediately, I typed, I will no longer be providing financial support to this family. I'm giving you 6 months to make alternative arrangements for your bills and expenses. After that, you're on your own. 6 months felt generous considering they'd been stealing from me, but I didn't want to be cruel. I just wanted to be done. I wrote about the joint savings account and how betrayed I felt that they'd taken money without asking while simultaneously excluding me from the family gathering I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Nicole calling Jacob a brat was unforgivable, I wrote. But what was even worse was watching both of you stand there and let it happen. Jacob is 6 years old. He did nothing wrong, and he deserved to be protected by his grandparents. Instead, you chose Nicole's comfort over his basic dignity. I saved the email as a draft. I wasn't ready to send it yet, but writing it all out felt incredibly cathartic. Seeing the numbers in black and white, acknowledging the pattern of abuse, and enabling putting words to the hurt I'd been carrying for years. Then I called my financial advisor. Madison, Dave said when he answered, This is unexpected. Everything okay? Not really, I said. I need to freeze a joint savings account immediately and set up a new financial plan. We spent an hour on the phone going over my accounts, my expenses, and my goals. Dave was great. He didn't ask for details about why I suddenly needed to cut off financial support to my family, but he helped me figure out exactly how much money I'd been giving them each month and how to redirect those funds into my own savings and Jacob's college fund. This is going to free up almost $3,000 a month, Dave said when we finished the calculations. That's a significant amount of money to put toward your own goals. $3,000 a month. $36,000 a year. I'd been giving my family more money annually than some people make at full-time jobs, and I'd been doing it so quietly and consistently that I'd almost forgotten it wasn't normal. Dave, I said, I want to set up automatic transfers to move that money into separate accounts where I can't access it easily. Savings for Jacob's college emergency fund may be a vacation fund. I don't want to be tempted to give it away again. Smart thinking, he said. And Madison, I don't know what's going on with your family, but protecting your financial future is always the right choice. You can't take care of anyone else if you don't take care of yourself first. After I hung up with Dave, I sat in my quiet kitchen for a long time thinking about the day. This morning, I'd been the dutiful daughter and sister quietly supporting my family while accepting scraps of affection in return. Tonight, I was someone different. Someone who had been shown genuine kindness by a stranger and realized how much I'd been settling for. I thought about Jacob's face when he said he was thankful for not crying anymore. I thought about how happy he'd been at Olivia's house, how relaxed and comfortable he'd seemed with people who treated him with basic kindness and respect. I thought about Olivia's words about family, not always meaning the people you're related to, about how some of the best families are chosen, not born. My phone buzzed with another text from my mom. Please call me. We need to talk about today. Nicole feels terrible about what happened. Nicole feels terrible. Not, we're sorry Jacob was hurt, or we're sorry you were excluded, or we're sorry we took your money without asking. Nicole feels terrible, which means I'm supposed to forgive her and pretend nothing happened and go back to being the family ATM. I deleted the text without responding. Then I went upstairs to check on Jacob, who was sleeping peacefully in his own bed, surrounded by his stuffed animals and the Pokemon cards Mia had given him as a going-away present. Sweet dreams, buddy, I whispered, kissing his forehead. Tomorrow we start fresh. And I meant it. Tomorrow we were going to start building the life we deserved, surrounded by people who valued us for who we were, not what we could provide. Tomorrow, the old Madison who always said yes and never complained was officially retiring. But first, I was going to send that email. I sent that email at 11:30 that night, and I slept better than I had in months. There's something incredibly freeing about finally telling the truth, even when the truth is painful. Especially when the truth is painful. My mom called me at 7 the next morning. Black Friday. I was making Jacob pancakes and listening to him chatter about his new friend Mia when my phone started ringing. Madison, my mom said before I could even say hello, we need to talk about that email you sent. Good morning to you too, Mom, I said, stirring the pancake batter. How are you feeling today? How am I feeling? She repeated, and her voice was strained. Madison, you can't be serious about cutting off financial support. We depend on that money. I know you do, I said calmly. That's exactly the problem. But what are we supposed to do? She asked, and I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. Your father's on a fixed income and with Nicole living here. Mom. I interrupted. Nicole is 28 years old. She can get a job. She can contribute to the household. She can take responsibility for her own life instead of expecting everyone else to fund it. There was a long pause, and when my mom spoke again, her tone had shifted from panic to defensive. It's not that simple, Madison. Nicole has mental health issues. She's struggling. And I've been paying for her to get help with those struggles for years, I said. Therapy, rehab, medication, housing. How much more help does she need before she starts helping herself? You don't understand what it's like, my mom said. You've always had everything together. You don't know what it's like to watch your child struggle. That comment hit me like a slap. I don't know what it's like to watch my child struggle. I was a single mother who'd raised Jacob alone while working full-time and supporting her entire extended family financially. I knew exactly what struggle looked like. Struggle. Mom, I said, and my voice was very quiet. Yesterday, Nicole called my 6-year-old son a brat and told us both to leave your house. While you were silent, while Dad was silent, you watched my child get emotionally abused by his aunt and you did nothing to protect him. So don't tell me I don't understand what it's like to watch a child struggle. Another long pause. When my mom spoke again, she sounded like she was crying. Nicole feels terrible about what she said to Jacob. She was having a bad day. She wasn't thinking clearly. Nicole feels terrible, I repeated. What about how Jacob feels? What about how I feel? When do our feelings matter in this family? Of course your feelings matter, my mom said, but it sounded hollow. You matter to us, Madison. You know that. Do I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it seems like I matter to you as a bank account and an emergency contact, but not as a person with feelings and needs of my own. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Mom, I said, I've been supporting this family financially for 5 years. I've paid over $150,000 in bills and expenses and emergencies. Yesterday, you took $5,000 from my savings account without asking, and then you kicked me out of Thanksgiving dinner. In what world does that say, you matter to us? We were going to tell you about the money, she said weakly. When, I asked, after you'd spent it, after Nicole had used it to pay whatever debts she'd racked up this time. You weren't going to tell me, Mom. You were hoping I wouldn't notice. I could hear her crying now, and part of me felt bad for being so harsh. But the other part of me, the part that had been taken advantage of for years, knew that being gentle hadn't worked. Being understanding and patient and accommodating had only made things worse. "Madison, please," my mom said. "Can't we work this out? Can't we find a way to move forward?" "We can," I said, "but not the way we have been. I meant what I said in that email. 6 months to figure out your finances, and then I'm done." "6 months isn't enough time," she said. "It's more time than you gave me to process being uninvited from Thanksgiving," I said. "And it's a lot more consideration than you showed Jacob when Nicole was attacking him." After I hung up, I realized that I felt lighter somehow. Not happy exactly, but relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath for years and was finally allowed to exhale. Jacob looked up from his pancakes. "Was that Grandma?" "Yes, buddy." "Is she still mad at us?" "She's not mad at us," I said, choosing my words carefully. "She's upset because some things are going to change in our family, but that's not your fault. Sometimes adults have to make hard decisions." Jacob nodded solemnly, then went back to cutting his pancakes into perfect little squares the way he always did. Kids are remarkably resilient when you give them honest answers, instead of trying to protect them from reality. My dad called that afternoon while Jacob was taking a nap. He was calmer than my mom had been, but no less concerned about the financial implications of my decision. "Madison," he said, "I understand you're upset about yesterday, and you have every right to be. Nicole was out of line." "Thank you for saying that," I said, because it was the first acknowledgement I'd gotten from either of my parents that Nicole's behavior had been unacceptable. "But cutting off financial support entirely seems extreme," he continued. "Can't we find a middle ground?" "What kind of middle ground?" I asked. "Maybe you could continue helping with the mortgage and we'll figure out the rest," he suggested. "The house is the most important thing." The house. The house that I'd been paying for while being excluded from family gatherings that took place in it. "Dad," I said, "do you understand why I'm angry?" "You're upset about Nicole's behavior," he said. "And I get that, but she's been going through a really hard time lately." "It's not just about Nicole's behavior," I said. "It's about the fact that you and Mom allowed it. It's about the fact that you took money from my account without asking. It's about years of being taken for granted while Nicole gets all the attention and accommodation." "We don't take you for granted," my dad said, but he didn't sound convincing. "Dad, when's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you asked about Jacob's school or my work or my life? When's the last time you remembered my birthday without Facebook reminding you?" He was quiet for a long moment. "Every conversation we have is about Nicole's latest crisis or money or some emergency that needs to be handled immediately." I continued. "I'm not your daughter in this family. I'm your problem solver." "That's not how we see you," he said softly. "Maybe not consciously," I said, "but that's how you treat me, and I'm done being treated that way." We talked for another 20 minutes, but it was clear that my parents couldn't or wouldn't understand why I was drawing these boundaries. They kept coming back to the money, to Nicole's problems, to the logistics of how they were going to manage without my support. What they didn't seem to grasp was that this wasn't ultimately about money. This was about respect, about being valued, about teaching Jacob that he deserved to be treated with kindness by the people who claimed to love him. 2 days later, my mom called again. This time she wanted me to come over to talk in person. "Nicole wants to apologize to you and Jacob," she said. "She's been feeling terrible about what happened." I wasn't particularly interested in another one of Nicole's apologies, but I was curious to see if she'd actually acknowledge what she'd done wrong, or if this would be another version of, "I'm sorry you were hurt by my actions." "Fine," I said, "but Jacob stays home. I'm not subjecting him to more drama." "That's probably for the best," my mom agreed, which told me everything I needed to know about how genuine Nicole's remorse really was. I arranged for Jacob to spend the afternoon at Olivia's house. She was happy to watch him, and he was thrilled to see Mia again. It occurred to me that in the past week, Olivia had shown more kindness to my son than my own family had shown him in months. I drove to my parents' house with a folder full of bank statements, receipts, and documentation of every penny I'd given them over the past 5 years. If we were going to have this conversation, we were going to have it with facts, not emotions. My mom answered the door looking nervous and exhausted. My dad was sitting in his recliner and Nicole was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Nicole?" I asked as I sat down on the couch. "I thought she wanted to apologize." "She's upstairs getting ready," my mom said. "She's been anxious about this conversation." Of course she was anxious. She was about to have to face the consequences of her actions for once in her life. "Madison," my dad said, "before Nicole comes down, we want you to know that we've been talking and we understand why you're upset." "Do you?" I asked, opening my folder. "Because I brought some things I think you should see." I spread the bank statements and receipts across their coffee table like evidence in a court case. 5 years of mortgage payments, utility bills, car repairs, insurance premiums, medical expenses, and rehab costs. "This is what I've given this family since 2019, I said. $157,432. My parents stared at the papers in silence. "That doesn't include the money I've spent on gifts, groceries when I've been here, gas money for trips to visit Nicole in various treatment facilities, or the $5,000 you took from my account without permission." I continued. "That's just the major expenses." "Madison," my mom said quietly, "we never asked you to keep track like this." "You never asked me to keep track of the money I was giving you," I repeated. "You never thought I might want to know where over $150,000 of my hard-earned money was going." "We appreciated everything you did," my dad said. "We just didn't realize you were keeping such detailed records." "Of course I was keeping records," I said. "It's my money. And it's a good thing I did because apparently you two had no idea how much I was actually contributing to this household." That's when Nicole finally made her appearance. She came down the stairs slowly, like she was walking to her own execution. She looked better than she had on Thanksgiving, showered and dressed in clean clothes, but there was something wary and defensive in her posture. "Madison," she said, sitting down across from me. "I wanted to apologize for what I said on Thanksgiving. I was having a really bad day and I took it out on you and Jacob." It was a start, but it wasn't enough. "What specifically are you apologizing for?" I asked. Nicole looked confused. "For what I said." "What did you say, Nicole?" She shifted uncomfortably. "I said some mean things." "You called my 6-year-old son a brat," I said clearly. "You told us both to leave because you couldn't handle being reminded of your own life choices. You screamed at me on our parents' front porch and accused me of not caring about this family. Is that what you're apologizing for?" "Yes," she said. But she couldn't meet my eyes. "And do you understand why that was wrong? Because it hurt your feelings?" she said like she was reciting a script. "Because it traumatized a child, Nicole. Because you took your anger and frustration out on a 6-year-old who had done nothing wrong. Because you made him feel unwanted and confused and scared." Nicole's face started to crumple. "I didn't mean to hurt Jacob." "But you did hurt him," I said. "And intention doesn't erase impact. Jacob spent the rest of that day asking me what he'd done wrong and why his aunt didn't like him." I was having such a hard time that day," Nicole said. "Mark had just told me he was seeing someone else, and I found out about all these debts he'd left me with, and I couldn't handle seeing you with your perfect life." "My perfect life," I repeated. "Nicole, do you know how I afford my perfect life?" She looked confused. I gestured to the papers spread across the coffee table. "I afford my life by working 60 hours a week at a job I love, by budgeting carefully, by making responsible choices, and by not expecting other people to fund my mistakes. There's nothing perfect about it. It's just the result of consistent effort and good decisions." "You don't understand," Nicole said, and her voice was getting defensive again. "You've always had everything easy." That comment broke something inside me. I'd been trying to stay calm and rational, but the idea that my life had been easy was so ludicrous that I couldn't help myself. "Easy," I said, and my voice was rising. "Nicole, I had Jacob when I was 24 and his father disappeared. I finished college while pregnant, worked through morning sickness, pumped breast milk in supply closets, and raised him alone while building a career. I've paid for your rehab 3 times, bought you a car, covered your rent, and kept our parents from losing their house. In what universe has my life been easy? You always make everything work out, she said weakly. Because I work to make things work out, I said. Because I don't give up when things get hard. Because I take responsibility for my choices instead of expecting other people to fix my problems. I have mental health issues, Nicole said, playing her trump card. So, do a lot of people, I said. Mental health issues don't give you permission to be cruel to children. They don't excuse taking money from your family without asking. They don't make it okay to treat people badly whenever you're having a hard day. Nicole stared at me like I'd slapped her. I don't think anyone had ever told her that her mental health struggles didn't excuse her behavior. I've been paying for your therapy for 2 years, I continued. I've paid for 3 rehab stays. I've funded your housing and your food and your transportation. And instead of getting better, instead of taking responsibility for your recovery, you've gotten more entitled and more demanding. That's not true, Nicole said, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? I asked. When was the last time you had a job for more than 3 months? When was the last time you contributed anything to this household besides drama and expenses? When was the last time you did something for someone else without expecting something in return? Nicole was crying now, but they weren't the manipulative tears I was used to. They looked like genuine shock and hurt, like she was finally seeing herself through someone else's eyes. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know you'd been paying for all that stuff. I looked at my parents. You didn't tell her. My mom and dad exchanged guilty looks. We didn't want her to feel bad, my mom said. You didn't want her to feel bad about me paying her rehab bills and buying her cars and covering her living expenses, I asked incredulously. You thought it was better for her not to know where the money was coming from. We thought it would make her feel worse about herself, my dad said. So instead of letting her feel appropriately bad about being financially dependent on her sister, you let her think that money just magically appeared whenever she needed it, I said. You let her take my generosity for granted because you didn't want her to have to face the reality of how much other people were sacrificing for her. The room was silent except for Nicole's crying. All these years, she said, I thought Mom and Dad were taking care of everything. I thought they were choosing to help me. They were choosing to help you, I said, with my money. Why didn't you tell me? Nicole asked, looking at our parents with something that might have been betrayal. Because we knew you'd feel guilty, my mom said. I should have felt guilty, Nicole said, and for the first time, she sounded like an adult taking responsibility for her actions. I should have known that money was coming from somewhere, that someone was making sacrifices for me. Yes, you should have, I agreed. And you should have asked questions when they told you not to worry about money. You should have wondered how parents on a fixed income could afford to send you to expensive treatment facilities and buy you cars. Nicole wiped her eyes and looked at me directly for the first time since she'd come downstairs. What can I do? She asked. How can I make this right? You can get a job, I said. You can start paying rent to Mom and Dad. You can take responsibility for your own debts and expenses. You can stop expecting other people to fund your life while you figure out what you want to be when you grow up. What about my mental health treatment? She asked. What about it? I said. There's Medicaid. There are sliding scale therapy programs. There are support groups. Plenty of people get mental health treatment without having their siblings pay for it. But the good programs are expensive, she said. Then get a job that provides good health insurance, I said. Or accept that you might have to use less expensive resources, like everyone else who doesn't have a sister willing to bankroll their recovery. Nicole looked stunned, like the idea of being responsible for her own healthcare costs had never occurred to her. Madison, my mom said, don't you think you're being a little harsh? Am I asked. Nicole is 28 years old. She's been an adult for 10 years. When exactly were you planning to stop making excuses for her and start expecting her to act like a grown-up? She's been struggling, my dad said. Everyone struggles, I said. The difference is that most people don't have families who enable their struggles by removing all consequences and expectations. I started gathering up the papers from the coffee table. Where are you going? My mom asked. Home, I said. I've said what I came to say. But we haven't figured anything out, my dad protested. There's nothing to figure out, I said. I told you my boundaries in the email. 6 months to make alternative financial arrangements, and then I'm done. That timeline hasn't changed. What about Christmas? My mom asked desperately. Surely you'll come for Christmas. I paused at the door. I don't think that's a good idea. Madison, please, my mom said, and she was crying now too. We're still a family. Are we? I asked. Because families protect each other. Families don't steal from each other. Families don't kick 6-year-olds out of holiday dinners to spare someone else's feelings. We can do better, my dad said. Give us a chance to do better. I thought about it for a moment. Part of me wanted to slam the door and never look back, but another part of me wasn't ready to completely cut ties, especially for Jacob's sake. Christmas Eve, I said finally. Jacob and I will come for 1 hour on Christmas Eve, but if there's any drama, any manipulation, any targeting of Jacob, we leave immediately and we don't come back. Thank you, my mom said, like I'd given her a gift instead of setting a reasonable boundary. I drove home feeling emotionally drained but oddly satisfied. I'd said everything I needed to say, I'd set clear boundaries, and I'd held my ground even when they'd tried to guilt me into backing down. Jacob was still at Olivia's house, so I picked him up and filled her in on how the conversation had gone. I'm proud of you, she said. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted, but it felt good to finally tell the truth about everything. How do you feel now? She asked. Lighter, I said. Like I've been carrying this huge weight around for years, and I finally got to put it down. 2 days later, I got an email from Nicole. Not a text, which would have been typical for her, but a long, thoughtful email that must have taken her hours to write. Madison. It started. I've been thinking about our conversation, and I owe you a real apology. Not just for Thanksgiving, but for years of taking advantage of your generosity without even knowing I was doing it. I've been talking to my therapist about everything you said, and she helped me understand that I've been avoiding responsibility for my own life by letting other people solve my problems. She said that's called learned helplessness, and it's common in families where one person always swoops in to fix things. I realize now that mom and dad have been enabling me, and that you've been paying for that enabling without me even knowing it. That's not fair to you, and it's not healthy for me either. I'm going to be entering a structured BPD program in Arizona next month. It's a 6-month residential program that focuses on building life skills and learning to manage emotions without depending on other people to regulate them for me. I'll be working with therapists who specialize in helping people like me learn to be self-sufficient. I found the program myself, and I'm paying for it myself using the money I got from selling my car. I know that's not enough to make up for everything you've spent on me, but it's a start. I don't know if we can ever have a normal sister relationship, but I'd like to try someday, maybe when I'm healthier and more stable, maybe when I can contribute something positive instead of just taking. I'm sorry I called Jacob a brat. I'm sorry I made him feel unwanted. I'm sorry I've been so selfish and entitled for so many years without even realizing it. Maybe when I get back from Arizona, we can build something better. I hope so. Nicole, I read the email 3 times, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity, but it seemed genuine. For the first time in years, Nicole was taking responsibility for her actions and making plans to change her behavior without expecting anyone else to fund or facilitate her progress. It didn't undo the hurt she'd caused, and it didn't change my boundaries. But it gave me hope that maybe someday we could have a healthier relationship. Christmas Eve came, and Jacob and I drove to my parents' house for our promised 1-hour visit. Nicole was already in Arizona, which made things less tense but also strangely sad. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and I hoped the program would help her. The visit went better than I'd expected. My parents were clearly trying to be more mindful of Jacob asking him about school and actually listening to his answers instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. They gave him thoughtful presents and didn't mention money or Nicole's problems once. When our hour was up, I stood to leave and my mom looked like she wanted to ask us to stay longer but caught herself. "Thank you for coming," she said instead. "This meant a lot to us." "You're welcome," I said. "Maybe we can do this again sometime." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a goodbye either. Christmas Day was spent at Olivia's house again, along with two other single moms from the hospital where she worked and their kids. It was loud and chaotic and full of laughter, exactly what a holiday should be. Mia and Jacob were inseparable, building elaborate Lego creations and teaching the younger kids how to play Pokemon. Olivia had made this amazing brunch spread, and everyone contributed something, whether it was food or entertainment or just good conversation. "I'm grateful we found each other," Olivia said when she pulled me aside to help her get more coffee from the kitchen. "Me too," I said. "You saved us that day at the grocery store. I don't know what we would have done if you hadn't invited us over." "You would have figured it out," she said. "You're stronger than you think you are." That evening, after we'd gotten home and Jacob was getting ready for bed, he asked me a question that made my heart ache. "Mommy," he said as I was tucking him in, "are we still a family? Just me and you?" "Of course we are, buddy," I said, sitting down on the edge of his bed. "We'll always be a family." "But what about Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Nicole?" he asked. I thought about how to answer that. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that family relationships are complicated? That love doesn't always look the way you expect it to? "They're still family too," I said finally. But family doesn't just mean the people you're related to. Family is also the people who show up for you with love and kindness. Like Olivia and Mia, like the friends who invite you over when you need a place to belong. Jacob nodded solemnly. "So we have lots of family." "We do," I said. "We have the family we were born into, and we have the family we choose. Both kinds are important, but the family you choose is special. Because they're with you. Because they want to be. Not because they have to be." "I like our chosen family," Jacob said sleepily. "Me too, buddy. Me too." As I turned off his light and closed his door, I realized that this was what I'd been searching for all along. Not a perfect family, not people who never made mistakes or had problems, but people who showed up consistently with genuine care and respect. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Thank you for spending Christmas with us. You and Jacob made everything more special." That's when I knew we were going to be okay. Jacob and I had each other. We had people who valued us for who we were, and we had the freedom to build the kind of life we wanted without being held hostage by other people's dysfunction. It had taken 30 years and a lot of heartbreak to learn that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who can't or won't treat you well. But I'd finally learned it, and we were going to be just fine. If this story resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you never miss our latest family drama stories. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever been the responsible one in your family? What would you have done in my situation? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.